Hello, my dragons. So now we're doing part 3 of the Intro to Psych of Violence and Aggression. And I think I mistitled part 2 and actually put part 3. But this is the real part 3. And when I title it, I'll put down the real part 3. Okay, so continuing on our discussion, I've moved indoors, as you can see. This is the kitchen. Right there. There's a bag of corn. This is just my junk on the top. Sink with dirty dishes. Yeah, I know you guys are going to be like looking at that going, dang, do your dishes. Anyway, so now we're talking about public health and criminal justice. So the public health model, they stress about 4 different things right off the bat. They look at surveillance. They look at collecting, interpreting data. They're very data-driven. Which, because it's a science, it runs the same way that many other sciences do. But they report health data, and they report accurate health data. Or they're supposed to report accurate health data. I don't know what the Rona's doing, but it's very interesting because right now I'm involved in doing some research with some researchers around the world. I have research partners in Australia, South Africa, Canada, and in the United States. And we've found some really huge discrepancies about reporting corona data from the health departments. So we're going to see how that unfolds. I've been reading a lot of background stuff on pandemics and historical stuff on pandemics, and I found that that was common even back in the day when we're talking about bubonic plague. So let's see where that leads us. So they do, they look for risk factors for groups, who has the greatest risk for disease and injury, and what type of circumstances promote those things within that group. And so they look for those correlates of a disease or of a activity. They explore the risk factor itself. What is it that's potentially a causative factor? Is it, diet? Is it location? Is it income, education, all of those correlates? And then they try and do program implementation. So they base programs on the data that they found, and then they implement it, and then they evaluate it. So that's something that's really cool that they do. They focus on 3 different types of risk factors. Number 1, structural and cultural. So these are things like poverty. So they're looking at some kind of thing that they could address in one of those program implementations. 2, criminogenic commodities like guns or substance abuse or something like that. And 3, situational things like there are some places, just being in the place enhance violence because it's very conducive to violence. And you put all 3 of those together and you probably have a powder keg of stuff that, even though it may not be in a person to engage in violence or aggression, those situations have what we call demand characteristics that propel an individual toward violence. And so I'm going to, later on in the semester, we're going to talk about one of the things that the Secret Service uses when they talk about propelling violence. And you'll find it very interesting. So public health complements. It doesn't replace criminal justice, but it complements and it helps criminal justice. It looks for different things to inform criminal justice. And it's a good model. Okay, so we use it all the time. Not that we want to put all the blame on one or another, but we look for systemic things in public health that can address those sorts of things. So for instance, we're doing coronavirus in South Africa, and my research partners in South Africa are saying, there's an underreporting of coronavirus. South Africa has these shanty towns. There's about 4 million people, and the largest one, it's Kaliste. And okay, the driver of that is poverty, and they've never actually reported any kind of major disease like, malaria or what's the one I'm thinking of? I can't think of it right now, but not plague, cholera is what I'm thinking of. They've never had to do that. So what makes you think there's going to be inaccurate reporting in coronavirus? Their hospitals, I toured their hospitals when I was down there, and their hospitals like as big as this kitchen. So they have one toilet for every 150 people out of a little shanty town of 4 million people. So yeah, it's quite interesting. So when you look at the 2, this makes a great essay question. It's on slide 8. looking at the comparison of intervention between public health and criminal justice. Public health is more proactive and criminal justice is more reactive. So public health tries to address the issue before it becomes an issue, and criminal justice is up there picking up the pieces after it becomes an issue. So the primary prevention looks at the occurrences of disease, the injury, the death, and they look at trying to get it under control by targeting one or more critical risk factor. Secondary prevention is looking at change in key stages of the development of the disease. We see that today where they're trying to mitigate the disease as corona is rising. What can we do to flatten that curve? Whereas primary prevention would have been, what can we do to prevent it stopping to begin with, okay? And then tertiary intervention looks after the illness has manifested, and it looks at long-term consequences and what can we do to prevent this from happening again. So it's all together, those 1, 2, 3 things. You can apply it to the coronavirus and you can see all the things we should have done but didn't do. So that's what I mean. Public health models and criminal justice models work together, because if you think that we're going to get out of coronavirus thing without lawsuits, you're kidding yourself, because they will be coming. They already have started, and it's going to be explosive, okay? So let's leave that model behind and look at how do we study criminal justice. Well, we study criminal justice in a lot of different ways. Much of it, historically, they did not do the empirical analysis that we find in other sciences like biology, chemistry, psychology. And they did what we would call very crude or rudimentary scientific research. But criminal justice is moving forward, and there is money in federal budget for funding research in criminal justice because it's very important. So historically it started out really crude, and now it is progressing to a more professional, academic type of discipline. So that's a really good thing. We also, with criminal justice, it is anchored in criminal law, and so you always have to look at what the law says about violence and aggression, what is homicide, what is aggression, and apply that to criminal justice, okay? So on slide 8, you see a really good discrepancy between what the law says and what police records might show about two crimes that are relatively similar, okay? So it's challenging to do violence and aggression research, okay? Because the things that we're finding out, not everybody keeps good records, not everybody reports, not everybody remembers. Some people don't even know a crime when they've been a victim of a crime, or they don't even know a crime when they're committing a crime. Oh, is that against the law? Oh, I didn't know that, okay? So you have to look at those kinds of things when you're doing research. On slide 9, they give a lot of really good discussion about base rate data and how much the population, what's the population, and what the murder rate is for the population, okay? And so it's good to know statistics, but statistics, unless you analyze data, it's just descriptive. It's just telling you what are the numbers, what's the prevalence of something that's happening. When you really want to find out why it's happening, or if it's happening more to one population versus another population, then you have to do an analysis, okay? And then it will give you what we call inferential statistics, where you infer cause and effect, okay? And that's where all science wants to go, okay? Cause and effect. So we can look at, do cities have higher or lower rates than other places? What happens in those kinds of cities to balance out crime rates and things like that? Sometimes people think that, you know, violence and aggression is normal. Like I gave you the example about, you know, the football coach, or I don't want to pick on football, but a coach yelling at a student. That's aggressive, violent behavior. And a lot of people think, well, that's just part of the game. Well, that's not normal, okay? You can encourage people without yelling and screaming at them, but, you know, they've accepted that as part of the whole thing. So they may not report it, you know? Same thing with the Me Too movement. A lot of women said, well, that's what you get when you go into showbiz. No, that's not normal, and you should report it. Same thing with the child sexual abuse with either the Boy Scouts or the church. Same thing. It's not normal, and a lot of people didn't realize that that wasn't normal. So you're battling that as well. People who don't know a crime when they are the victims of crime, and we're going to talk about that later on, because that is really a big deal. Okay, a lot of people don't know that. I personally feel that they don't know that because they haven't been given good criminal justice education all through their educational system. And I'm a big advocate for, hey, you got to start doing this when they're in grammar school, because how do they know that they're a victim of a crime if they don't even know what's a crime and what's not a crime? See? And we'll talk about that in class. It's always a hot topic with students. The tripartite approach to understanding violence is to look at patterns in violence, okay? How do patterns arise? How are they perceived? How do we make decisions? What kind of resources should we allocate to different types of problems? And this is really interesting, okay? We see examples of this in current events. So we want to try and understand violence. We want to try and diminish it. It is going down. The crime rate is going down. And we really want to look at solutions, workable solutions, for different types of communities, okay? So we want to look at the existing potential causes for a crime in your community and in the United States, and look at the specific types of violence and what kind of solutions can we offer to improve, okay? And it starts out at the micro level, looking at the individual, all the way to the macro level, the community and the country, passing through family and different regional groups as well. So there are 5 different categories. The individual lies with the person, starts with the person. The group, okay, the person is in a particular group of people, and that group is rather violent. The third is an organization, so it might be there are organizations that they belong to. Maybe they have a, they're in a school situation, or they're on a team, or they're in some sort of organization that legitimizes violence and aggression, okay? Community, maybe it's a particular community, okay? And sometimes we define community by other socioeconomic variables like income or occupation or all those sorts of things as well. So looking at the community. And then the social structure or the culture. So when I say culture, I mean that in a broad sense. So I don't mean like a race or ethnicity. I mean like the culture, like the community, the culture of the community. What are their power issues? What is the class issue? What is the educational issue? Sex, drugs, etc. Those kinds of influences as well. So you've heard like a little bit of part 1, 2, and 3 of just the intro of some of the things that we're going to be discussing over the course of the semester. We're going to get into some really interesting conversations. I look forward to that. And it's very important that you understand crime and violence and aggression, because if you're in this field, you're going to encounter it all the time. I'm going to have some guest speakers. I don't know if they'll come into the class or if we'll do Zoom yet. My guess is that they'll want to come into the class. I'm not trying to offend anyone or shock anyone, but violence and aggression can be shocking. So this is the field you've chosen. So get ready. You'll do fine. I have faith in you that when I'm in the old professor's home, you'll be handling all the criminal justice questions of the day. So I'll see you next week, either from my kitchen or my deck or in class. I'll keep you posted. And remember, it's a great day to be a dragon. See ya.